Algebra 1 students. This is a video on the blended lesson 12 and 13, but it's going to concentrate, this is part 1, it's going to concentrate on lesson 12, and part 2 will concentrate on lesson 13. So the purpose of this is not to walk you through every single activity, but to make sure that you have the basic understanding of what the lesson is about. Okay? So let's set the stage. You know that we have been dealing with equations for a couple of weeks now. Okay? And we've talked about what solutions to equations are, how solutions to an equation are the points on the line that equation forms. We've learned that you can rearrange equations so that you isolate, meaning get all by itself, one variable over another. And the way you do this is by your properties of real numbers. So now we are going to look at a situation where you have two related equations. They're dealing with the same thing, but they're looking at different aspects of the same quantities. Okay? So the two equations are different. And we call this a system of equations. So this is like the next layer on top of what we have been doing, which has been rearranging equations. In the last couple of lessons, we graphed equations and got to see how the graphs that you can get different information about a graph depending on what form of an equation you're looking at. Okay? So now we're just building on that. So here's the warm-up for 12. So here we are, we're still talking about trail mix. Okay? Diego bought some raisins and walnuts to make a trail mix. Okay? Raisins cost $4 a pound and walnuts cost $8 a pound. And how much did Diego spend? He spent $15 on both ingredients. So your first job is going to be to take these several situations and apply them to your situation. You don't have to have an equation to do this. You know that if you have 4 pounds of raisins, you're going to multiply that by $4 a pound. So that's $16 right there. So you know that this is not a solution, because if you've got more than the money he spent on raisins, you absolutely could not also buy 2 pounds of walnuts. Right? So this is very straightforward. So we're going to move to the actual activity. So anyway, you're going to follow through with this. Okay? Okay. So here is the first activity. Okay? The first activity deals with the exact same situation. Okay? You've got a student who wants to make trail mix. He's buying raisins and walnuts. They cost the same amount of money. He spends the same amount of money. Okay? So now, instead of instinctively plugging in values and seeing if they work, this time you are going to write an equation to represent these two things. And they're telling you they want X to be the pounds of raisins and they want Y to be the pounds of walnuts. And then they say use graphing technology to graph the equation. So let's do that. So now I've opened up the student task statements for a minute. So I can type in here and you can see. So if raisins are $4 a pound and walnuts are $8, they told me to say that X is raisins and Y is walnuts. So you should be able to do this by now. It's 4 times X. For every pound of raisins, you're going to multiply that by 4. And then we're going to add $8 for walnuts, which is Y. So for every pound of walnuts, you're going to multiply that number by 8. And the whole thing has to equal $15. Okay? So here we're talking about dollars per pound, dollars per pound, dollars. Okay? So now they say, well, graph it. Well, I can't see where I can just put in the equation in Desmos, which you could do, by the way. You could just open up Desmos and put that equation in there. But you could also do it like this if you wanted to use the student task statements. Let's do the same thing. Okay? Let's say, well, what if I didn't have any raisins and I only bought walnuts? What would my starting number be? Okay? So the answer to that is you would take 15 and you would divide it by 8, wouldn't you? And that's 1.875. All right? So my Y, my vertical intercept is 1.875. So that's almost 1.9. So it's right about there. Okay? Oh, good. The point's there. Perfect. All right. So now I'm going to go back to the equation and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay? Now I'm going to pretend that, oh, he's not buying any walnuts. Walnuts are 0. This 8 times Y is gone. All I have is X. So now I'm going to divide 15 by 4. And that's going to give me 3.75. So on my X-axis, I'm going to look for 3.75, which is about 3/4. That's right about there. Okay? So now that I put those two dots, I can draw a line between them. Pretty easy. Okay? Okay, so let's try to draw this line. So I clicked on the line tool and they say that all you have to do is click on one point and click on the other point and supposedly it'll draw a line. I don't see it doing that. Maybe I have to be the one to connect the two myself. There you have it. So there's our line. But this isn't going to really help you finish filling out this table. So I suggest that you go to Desmos. Okay, so let's just open up Desmos, go to the graphing calculator, and put in that equation. 4x plus 8y equals 15. Okay? Now you can open this, you can drill down a little bit on this. You can change your scale a little bit so that when they ask you to fill in your table, you find your X value and then you just click on the graph and it'll tell you what the other value is. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video for a moment. So you guys, if I were you, I would pause the video so that you can check this out and finish filling out that table. Okay? Okay, and I want to explain, so here's the table that you're going to fill out, and like I said, you'll find your job a lot easier if you use Desmos. So what they want you to type in a question like this, explain or show your reasoning. I mean, come on, let's just use common sense. Because I looked at the X value or the Y value and I brought it over to the line and I clicked on the line and I saw what the other coordinate was that made that point. Something like that. You guys can say that. I know you can. Okay? So let's move on to the next part of this. So now here's a new piece of information. Okay? Diego bought a total of 2 pounds of raisins and walnuts combined. So are they talking about money anymore, young people? No, they are not. This is an equation about the same situation, but it's looking at total weight of the raisins and the walnuts as opposed to the cost of the raisins and the walnuts. Okay? So if X is raisins and Y is walnuts, because you got to keep it the same, and we are not talking about money, we're just talking about weight, okay? Then this is going to be my equation for this. X plus Y equals 2. Okay? And you could, like I said, you could draw it here if you wanted to. You would do it the way that I showed you. You would say, hey, we're not talking about raisins, we're talking about walnuts. If he didn't buy any raisins, pardon me, and he bought 2 pounds of stuff, then hey, what do you know? He bought 2 pounds of walnuts. If he didn't buy any walnuts and he only bought raisins and he bought 2 pounds, guess what? He bought 2 pounds of raisins. Okay? So, we're going to go back to Desmos and we're going to graph that graph. Okay, so I'm going to graph this graph, the other line, and then I am going to stop this video and start part 2. Okay, we may have 3 parts to this video. We're going to have as many parts as it takes so I can walk you guys through these activities and then help you understand what you're supposed to be looking for. So look at this, young people. Here's the other line. It's blue. Okay, and look what happens. It crosses the axes at 2 and 0, 2. 2, 0 and 0, 2. Okay? And it crosses this red line. So for more about why that works and what that means, I'll see you in part 2.